Oh, there we go. Hello, everybody. We'll start in a minute or two. I decided I might as well just do this as a stream because there's a lot of shit that I have to cover, and yeah, I feel I might as well share this live with you. I couldn't. I was going to record a video, but it was just going to get super long, and frankly, this is easier, and I'm lazy. So we have a lot of stories we're going to be going through today. A lot of stories, and I'm just going to give it a minute if anybody wants to show up. I will probably be editing this into separate segments, so we'll see how it goes. We'll just give this a minute. I forget where I put the meme-tage. I'm sure everybody misses the meme-tage. Let me see where my folder was. There we go. There's the memes. I think that's the... That's at least some of the meme-tage. Oh, I'll put that down at any rate. Okay, let's see. Where's the memes? A man cannot live without by bread alone, but he needs his dank memes. Oh, is my audio not coming through? Let me know if the audio's not coming through, and I can change that. Let's see here. No, the right mic is it like, is my audio? Testing, testing. Is this audio not working? Okay, I don't get it because it's telling me that my testing. Okay, because somebody's saying I'm accidentally streaming, so I don't know why you're saying that. Whatever. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, so we have a lot of stuff to cover tonight. Well, some more people filter in. There is a video I would like to show, which I think will provide a lot of good context for our first story this evening. No, there's nothing else you're supposed to be hearing, just my voice at the moment. So, let us, before we get into the rest of this, we're going to take a look at this video. And this, I think, will give context for some of the stuff we're going to talk about later. So this is Defamation, ADL Bullying Ukraine, downplaying the Holodomor as serious as the Holocaust. I remember I saw this years ago. This was one of the things that Red pilled me on the whole thing. So let's just watch this, and this will give us some good context.
A very beautiful view from here.
The first example of what Foxman is talking about was a meeting with a special advisor to the Ukrainian President Yushchenko. The Ukrainian government would like to distance itself from the embrace of the Russians and strengthen its ties with the West, most especially the United States. They believe that the Jews can become their allies in the US Congress.
We come to celebrate your democracy, but we also come with mixed feelings. The history of the Jewish people in this country is primarily one of tragedy. We would like to see a more active, a more aggressive approach to dealing with issues of anti-Semitism. It took a long...
Foxman is concerned about the Ukrainian government's comparison of the famine in the Ukraine before World War II with the Holocaust.
The one thing that you need to be sensitive about is not to link it with the Holocaust. Be careful that it not be played as your genocide, our genocide, because that will be counterproductive on all sides.
We, of course, respect Holocaust, and I understood your message, and we try to be very, very diplomatic.
Here it is.
He's such a stereotype. The language, the...
I was impressed by the way Foxman handled the meeting, but it also raised some questions for me.
He was kind of pushing him a little bit, huh?
He was kind of what?
Pushing him.
Yes, of course.
It's always like that? Yeah?
Of course.
I wasn't sure how bringing up things that had happened over 60 years ago had any relevance to fighting anti-Semitism today.
In order to combat it effectively, I think that you have to take responsibility for anything that happened in the past and then reach the present and then go forward.
With your husband, when you quarrel, sometimes you need to give some slack to get what you want.
No?
You always
I bring
tough?
up everything from the past. 50 years. What his mother did. Absolutely not. No, that's not the American Jewish way. I don't know about the Israeli Jewish way.
Give them the guilt trip.
That's, yeah, absolutely. We need to play on that guilt.
I asked when you're having a quarrel, whether she give you some slack sometimes to, to make up, and she said no.
I'm always wrong, and she's always right.
But wait a minute, do I ever forget anything in the
Never,
past?
never. Suzanne will tell me 20 years ago what I did wrong. If we have an argument now, but, 20 years you did this. I said, but Suzanne, it was 20
Wait
years
a
ago.
minute, but do you know why? Because he has not stood up and taken responsibility for that behavior.
The guilt trip she's giving you, does it help?
No.
So maybe the guilt trip we're giving them is not the right solution. Maybe we should give them some slack and say, okay, let's be friends. Not forget the past, but kind of be a little bit more, liberal.
Moderate.
Yeah.
The
Something
guilt-
we happen to, I happen to
The
agree.
guilt of the father should not be visited on on the sons. And it's true, of course it's true.
I agree with you.
It's true, you have to.
You
we
cannot let it go down, but you can't keep playing on it as heavily as some people do. It's got to be moderate.
But the ADL is like one of the people who plays quite heavily.
No, we're moderate.
No, ADL plays heavily. There is not a speech.
I'm feeling.
Okay, so that, I think, gives us some background for what we're going to talk about now. And you will see how that is directly relevant. So let's see here. So as you may or may not have heard, recently the Canadian government, so the Canadian speaker brought a member of okay, so Zelensky went to the United States, and let me see here. Let me see if I can find this secret plan thing. We'll just have a little palate cleanser before we get into this. So, first new Ukraine Cinematic Universe film. Zelensky is going to try to go full supervillain, and he has a secret plan to liberate Eastern City after U.S. weapons deal. That's how they do things, apparently. That's how you actually run a war. You announce where you're going to attack, and you announce that that you have a secret plan that's going to be implemented in the near future. That is actually how you run a war. So, secret plan to liberate Eastern U.S. cities. So this is going to be, I'm not really sure if this is a plan for, is this going to be a thriller? Is it going to be a war movie? Is it going to be like a Tom Hanks Cold War film? I'm not really sure. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has unveiled bold plans to liberate the embattled city of Bakhmut while hinting at secret strategies to retake 2 other cities. We'll deoccupy Bakhmut. I think we will also deoccupy 2 more cities. I will not tell you what city story. And so we have the plan. Very, very comprehensive plan. So it's the secret plan, guys. It's trust the plan. Like, it's just seriously though. Like, who talks like this? We have a secret plan, secret master plan. Okay, so here is the let's just watch this clip. Maybe is this the clip?
Here in the chamber today, Ukrainian Canadian World veteran.
Before we go on, for those of you who are watching, what do you think my take on this is going to be? So I think a lot of people, I mean, I kind of gave away my take a bit with that opening video, but I'm kind of curious to see what people think I'm going to go with this. We're going to go with that.
From the Second World War, who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98. He's a Ukrainian hero, a Canadian hero, and we thank him for all his service.
It's Himmler. Friends of Simon Weissenthal.
I wish to make a brief statement. I wish to apologize to.
And Justin Trudeau refused to take any responsibility for this. He actually, let me see if I can find the clip where he blamed the Russians for it. He said that this was like a Russian psyop. Let's see here. Okay, we'll get into the story a bit more in a second. Okay. So, Zelensky visited. The whole thing with the going to the U.S. didn't work out, so he came here. The Speaker of the House brought in a Ukrainian Canadian soldier who was 98 years old, and he was presented as a fighter for Ukrainian liberty against the Russians. So it turned out, though, that he had served within the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS. If I recall, the Waffen SS, I believe, was the volunteer soldiers. So he served within the volunteer regiment. Eventually, they became part of the Ukrainian National Army, which was an organization that composed all of the Ukrainian volunteers that fought under the what's it called again? On the side of the Germans in World War II. So let's see here, 14th. There we go. The 14th Waffen SS Grenadier Division. So, because he had fought on the side that was the Nazis, that was on the same side as the Nazis, he had to apologize for this. He had to resign. He was labeled like evil. all the Jewish groups came out. Let me see if I can find the Justin, like, because Justin gave one of the most insane, like, okay, Justin, let's see here. Justin blames Russia. Or do you not see? Here we go. Okay, he looks, let me see, he is unhinged in this.
Obviously, it's extremely upsetting that this happened. The speaker has acknowledged his mistake and has apologized. But this is something that is deeply embarrassing to the Parliament of Canada and, by extension, to all Canadians. I think particularly of Jewish MPs and all members of the Jewish community across the country who are celebrating commemorating Yom Kippur today. I think it's going to be really important that all of us push back against Russian propaganda, Russian disinformation, and continue our steadfast and unequivocal support for Ukraine, as we did last week with announcing further measures to stand with Ukraine in Russia's illegal war against it.
Okay, so first and foremost, he took zero responsibility. I want to make that clear. We're supposed to believe that nobody on Justin Trudeau's team, well, actually, this is plausible because he probably surrounds himself with, like, historically illiterate, like, soy boys. But we're supposed to believe that not a single person on Justin Trudeau's media team, his diplomatic team, whatever, knew this guy's background. Knew that the Ukrainian National Army from World War II was a Axis-formed unit. So firstly, he didn't know. None of his people knew. It was entirely his. It was entirely the Speaker of the House. If he had have said, "Look, the buck stops with me. I wasn't aware of this. I should have been aware of this. My team should have been aware of this. I'm sorry. I'm the Prime Minister. It's my party. I'm not going to resign over this, but I apologize for this oversight." If he had said that, I would have respected him a little. But Justin Trudeau is an F-slur bitch, so he's just going to take no responsibility. He's going to throw this dude on the Speaker under the House. Who even knows if the Speaker did this? Justo might have done this, and they're like forcing this dude to be the fall guy for his retardation. So he took nothing. Let's see here. Also, it is the fault of the Russians that this happened. This was not the fault of the Canadians. This wasn't his team's fault. The Russian disinformation somehow led to this guy in Parliament, and everybody clapped for him. Now, when I heard about this for the first time, I was thinking to myself, who would I think this dude is? If I heard about a Ukrainian Canadian who was 98 years old who had fought for Ukrainian independence, I would think maybe I don't know if, let me look at the math. I don't know if the math would be 2023 minus 20. Okay. Let's see here. So that would have been 103 years ago. My first thought was maybe he was like fought as an insurrectionist in the 1920s or the 1930s. I guess he would have been too young back then. Yeah, just my first thought when I heard about it was maybe he fought during the 1930s or something, because there was a lot of resistance in Ukraine. But then I kind of realized that he was too old for that to be the case. So, yeah. The only other case I can really think of is if he had fought during World War II on the side of the Axis powers. So this is a massive, massive scandal. Justin is in trouble. The Speaker had to resign. It's rough. It's rough, guys. And this has brought back the whole narrative that you get from the pro-Russia crowd that Ukraine is a Nazi state, that Zelensky is a Nazi, that they run it based on National Socialism. I don't understand like what aspect, other than just some of the authoritarian measures, how Zelensky and his regime in any way resembles the National Socialism ideologically. I really have no idea about that. So, okay, so I just want you to, okay, so we saw this context, guys. We saw that this man is evil, that everything he did was bad. We can't celebrate Nazis. Now, the New York Times had put up this article, which is behind a paywall, which I can't put up, so fuck you, New York Times, you bunch of K-suckers. But this is a puff piece about the Azov Battalion. This entire thing is about how the Azov Battalion is awesome, how they've been reconstituted in light of a new offensive. And it shows them like with the wolf angle tattoos and the iron crosses and stuff like that. So like the New York Times ran a puff piece, probably multiple puff pieces, talking about how awesome Azov and like the far right nationalist Ukrainian battalions are. So those guys are bad. Also, the people who are complaining about this guy are the people who own and run the New York Times. So it's, the whole narrative is just fucking weird. Like, I was going to do a video, and I never got around to it, that was like going to be a joke, and it's like, is it time for us to rehabilitate Hitler? Because he supported Ukrainian independence, and he was anti-Russian, and stuff like that. And I didn't do it because I thought it was like too absurd even for a parody video. But we're getting there, and it's Ukraine's, it's Russia's fault for this whole thing. Okay, and so we also have, if not to add insult to injury, we have another group of people who I generally like, but can be really cringy when it comes to this issue. Let me see here. Just talk about Poland. We'll get to that. Poland extradite. Okay. So Poland found out about this guy, and the Polish, I think it's next month that the Polish government is having an election. And the immediate response is they do what Israel does. They start crying about it and go, we want to extradite this 98-year-old dude. Poland's education minister says he wants to take steps towards eventually extraditing a Canadian man who served with a Nazi SS unit and who was last week honored by the House of Commons. Like, it's so petty. This dude is 98 years old. Like, we can't just let it go. We can't just say, like, it's cruel and unusual. It's petty. It's like a bitch move to do this. No. We can't do it. We have to, like, drag this, like, dude back to Poland so we can whine about how much about World War II. And I'm someone who's been extremely critical of National Socialist Germany, what they did in Poland. I've talked about that a lot in the past. I've never been a Nazi shill, but it's just them jumping on this, crying, trying to make it about them. It's just, there's this desire that none of this can pass into the historical memory. And that is the Ukraine Cinematic Universe movie that is going to come out of this. It's going to be about how sometimes people need to move on in life. Sometimes like you just have to let the past go. You have to let old things die, as they say in Star Wars. That you have to let go of ancestral hatred. But at the end of the movie, there's the 98-year-old who's trying to reconcile with the kid, and the kid comes in and says, "We will never forget," and beats the Nazi to death. Beats the crying old man to death and says, "May this curse forever be upon your people, the blood libel of the Germans." And that's the story I think we have here. Like we are so invested in the Holocaust, we're so invested in World War II. We have to drag out 98-year-olds to try to make this shit relevant. So that's cool. That's cool. Anyways, so Poland decided to just throw this in for some reason because they wanted to cry about it. We will never forget. We will never forget. Yeah, that's basically it. Okay. So let's talk about the metapolitical narrative, because I can make fun of Justin Trudeau all day. I can make fun of Poland all day. I can make fun of all these people. But let's talk about this a bit more. So I made some notes about this. So let's go through the actual history of what happened during the Ukrainian Civil War. So let's see here. During the Russian Civil War. So, as you guys know, during World War One, the German Empire succeeded in defeating the Russian Empire, which collapsed under the provisional government of what's his name again? Damn, Kerensky, Alexander Kerensky, who was then overthrown by the Bolsheviks, and then you had this multi-front, exceedingly long war that went on for about 4 years, where you had a bunch of different factions. You had the White Movement, which was conservative and liberals. It was the remnants of the Tsarists, but also, like I said, liberals and kind of political moderates. You had the anarchists. The anarchists are the Black Army of Ukraine, who probably killed a whole bunch of my relatives, actually. I think they killed a bunch of German Mennonites. You also had the whites, you had Poland, you had Romania. Basically, everything just went batshit crazy. And during this time period, we had the Ukrainian state. I believe that this is the one that we are looking for. And they had declared independence, and they had fought against a bunch of different factions during this war. Eventually, they got defeated, and much of the remainder of their army went into exile into Poland, because keep in mind, during the Russian Civil War, Poland was able to keep the Russians out and maintain its independence. So, let's see here. Also, so in the aftermath of the war, Ukraine remained one of the most intransigent and resistant to the Bolshevik government of the various components of the Soviet state. There's a number of reasons for this. Like I said, they had their short-lived time as an independent state. There was some lingering resentment for some of the Russification policies, and they just didn't like the Bolsheviks. I think there's also the issue of just it being one of the largest Soviet republics. It's kind of interesting. If you look at the Soviet leadership, a lot of them, I think a majority of them, were either Ukrainian or had something to do with Ukraine. They came from Ukraine. The Ukrainian Communist Party was the largest state-specific party within the Soviet Union, because keep in mind, there was no Communist Party of Russia. It was just the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. So during the 1920s, you had a policy of Ukrainianization. So the Russian Empire, my understanding is their policy was that all East Slavs are Russian. So it wasn't necessarily that the Ukrainians were second-class citizens. They were first-class citizens, just they weren't Ukrainians, they were Russians. And they had to learn Russian, they had to take Russian, I think they took Russian last names, but they just tried to Russify Ukraine. So under the Soviet Union, they decided to go back on this. And one of the early policies of the Soviet Union, let me find it. So we had the period of Ukrainianization during the early Bolshevik rule. So under this, they changed. Let's see here. Where is it? Communist Party members and candidates. I'm trying to find it. Basically, they massively promoted the Ukrainian language. They deprioritized the Russian language. I think it was they switched it to Ukrainian only for a while. Let's see here. I'm just trying to find it. Sorry, guys. I should have looked at this better. Let's see here. Adopted the resolution on Ukrainianization, complete Ukrainianization. So by 1929, 97% of high school students in the Republic were obtaining their education in Ukrainian. So Russian was deprioritized. If we look at, let's see here, looking at the cultural stuff at the moment, out of 88 theaters in Ukraine, 66 were Ukrainian, 12 were Jewish, and 9 were Russian. 90% of newspaper, or like 80%, were in Ukrainian, and so you had the Ukrainian policy. So this was part of coordinate. I can't pronounce it, but the policy was attempting to destroy Russian nationalism or Great Russian nationalism in order to appease the various ethnic minorities within the country. This was under Lenin. What happened after Lenin died and after the 1930s and this policy ended is Stalin would eventually switch back to Russification in the aftermath of it. So my point more than anything else is you had a period in Ukraine where you had what was often, I think, called a cultural renaissance, wherein the Ukrainian language was revived, Ukrainian identity was extensively promoted, and then it immediately got shut down again, and it went back to being a Russified state. So we have this time period called the executed Renaissance in contemporary Ukrainian political language, which refers to basically the mass execution of all the people who came about during the Ukrainianization program. Poeters, writers, and dramatists who wrote in the Ukrainian language were arrested en masse, deported, imprisoned, or executed as part of the Great Purge. As someone points out, the USSR eventually incorporated some other areas into Ukraine, but we'll get to that in a minute. So the point I'm trying to make is just to start off with, Ukraine had a rough time just from a national identity perspective. Now let us move along to what happened after that. So this brings us to the Holodomor, which is a very controversial as to whether or not it's a genocide, and we'll get into that in a minute. So let's see, Holodomor. I hope you guys are finding this interesting. I'm just trying to go through this in like a systematic fashion and trying to actually take a look at this. Okay, so Holodomor is in Ukrainian death by hunger. That's hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, or actually, sorry, millions. Multiple millions of Ukrainians die from hunger. So the question that's often is was the Holodomor a deliberate policy? Was it carelessness? Was it that the Soviet Union saw a opportunity and they took it? It's an interesting question. So from my understanding, you went through agricultural collectivization in the Soviet Union under Stalin, wherein although private land was confiscated, it was done to collective farms, etc. Now, Ukraine was the breadbasket of the Soviet Union, and so it was particularly harsh in Ukraine compared to a lot of the other parts of the Soviet Union. It was done faster. Let's see here. Resistant to collectivization, especially in Ukraine. Yeah, the Ukrainians were very resistant to collectivization. Ukraine, as the breadbasket of Russia, also had the largest quotas per person. So you had a situation where there was high existing quotas on grain, which were further increased as a way of punishing the Ukrainian people for resisting collectivization. Let's see here. Let's see here. Now, something I found when I was doing research is during this time period, there was over 4,000 Ukrainian peasant revolts within Ukraine. Let me find it. Here we go. Okay, Ukraine before the Holodomor, discontent. Let's see here, cause of the Holodomor. To prevent. Okay, so took measures to destroy the Ukrainian peasantry and the Ukrainian intellectual and cultural elites to prevent them from seeking independence for Ukraine. Let's see here. I think they also killed 10,000 priests during this time period as well. So that's cool. So the majority of rural Ukrainians, there is about 4,000 local rebellions against collectivization, taxation, and violence by Soviet state authorities. Many people were deported to labor camps. They invented this concept of the kulak, who was the wealthy peasant, as it was. Yeah, so that happened. Now, we enter the Holodomor. So there was multiple years of failed harvests within Ukraine and the rest of the Soviet Union. However, the actual production of grain did not. The quotas did not decrease. So Ukraine already had very high quotas of grain. These were raised higher as a punishment for resisting collectivization. And so what they wound up doing after that was when the harvest failed, they demanded the same amount of grain. So they went in and basically just kept taking the grain from Ukraine. Now, whether or not this was a deliberate policy, we aren't entirely sure. Because, okay, so there's a couple different narratives. The first narrative is that this was just seen as a... Okay, here we go. Requisition quotas. In 1930, the Soviet Union instituted a policy of requisitioning. Ukraine produced 27% of Soviet harvest, but provided 38% of the Soviet deliveries, and then it went up to 42%. So they were providing substantially more than what they were producing to subsidize the rest of Russia, which was all under a Soviet regime. Okay, sorry. Let me just take a step back, just because there's a lot to cover. I'm just gonna not look at the chat and bring this up. Okay, so the Holodomor. There's the first theory is that the Soviet Union, much as with China during the Great Leap Forward, suffered a mass famine because of incompetence in Soviet agricultural policies. They didn't know what they were doing, and they completely rearranged the economy. Collectivization was a complete and total disaster, and the entire country starved. Ukraine was hit the worst, though, because of the quotas that were put in place, because they were expected to produce the most grain, so the most grain was asked for them. And so it could have just been pure incompetence. There wasn't any necessarily malicious intent. The second theory is that the Soviet government, it wasn't planned, but they decided to go with it. They said, okay, well, this is our opportunity to crush the Ukrainians. We didn't necessarily want a famine to come about, but it's here. So what we need to do is just kind of continue this. The Ukrainians are a problem. They're reactionaries. They're kulaks. If we can thin out the herd of them and break their will as part of this, and we're going to save the rest of the Soviet population who's more loyal to the Communist Party, then great. Then there's always the theory that this was some sort of deliberate ethnic genocide against Ukrainians as part of, possibly some people claim it's part of like Great Russian or Rus nationalism to try to exterminate the Ukrainian people. So for my part, what I think happened is the whole thing was a clusterfuck, and the Soviet government's like, okay, well, Ukrainians, we don't like them, so we're just going to keep taking their grain and giving it to everybody else. So was the end result of the whole thing to exterminate the Ukrainian people? I don't think so, but I think they were willing to give them the short end of a stick, or the very short end of the stick in terms of okay, I'm just gonna sorry, I just lost my train of thought there for a minute. We're just going to take their grain and give it to everybody else, and we don't really care what happens to them, and if they starve, if it breaks their will, then that's all the better. So that's what I think wound up happening. So you had the Holodomor, you had the reversal of the nationalization policy, and then in the 1940s, you have Germany come in. So Germany comes in like a wrecking ball, breaks everything apart, and I think, honestly, a lot of the Ukrainian people decided to, I think a lot of them just decided to throw in with the Nazis, because they were basically just saying, like, look, the situation's really bad. The Soviet Union was, like, could it be worse under Hitler? Could it be worse if the Nazis won the war, Ukraine became a Reich Commissariat, Ukraine became a protectorate? Could it really be worse than Stalin? And I think a lot of Ukrainians were like, no, it's probably not going to be worse than it was under Stalin. And so a lot of them sided with it. Now, as Konstantin points out, most of the pro-German Ukrainians came from Galicia, which was part of Poland, but was given to Russia as part of the partition of Poland during the Molotov-von Ribbentrop non-aggression pact that divided Poland up between the two major powers. Yes, Constantine, I'm covering this. I will get into that. It should be noted, as Constantine correctly points out, that on the whole, Ukrainians overwhelmingly fought for for the Soviet government as part of the Great Patriotic War to defend the homeland. My point is, so I'm not necessarily trying to well, I don't like communists, but I think the Ukrainians that fought on the side of the Russians in defense of the fatherland, that was admirable. And I think it was admirable the Ukrainians who just said, look, we want to bring down communism. We're going to take a gamble with National Socialist Germany. Maybe they'll let us have our independence. Maybe we'll be better off than we were now. If nothing else, they might have thought maybe the Nazis won't repress us religiously enough. The Soviet government killed something like 10,000 priests. So I can see both sides of this, why people fought on both sides. And I go to bring this context because my point is, the way this is portrayed is that 100% of the people who sided with Nazi Germany against the Soviet government were just Jew-hating psychopaths who just wanted to kill people. That there was no legitimate reason why any of them would want to fight Stalin, would want to go out against the Bolsheviks. Like, there is plenty of reasons, like, and this is what we do with the whole, like, all the Eastern European countries. Like, a lot of them, like, Hungary wasn't really fascist. I don't know how you want to count Marshal Antonescu's government, or Bulgaria, or no, Bulgaria I don't think joined in that war on the Eastern Front. But I think a lot of them just said, look, the Soviet Union wants to spread communism. The Nazi Germany doesn't seem as bad. We're going to go with the devil we don't know instead of the devil we do know. And this is going to be our only chance of taking down the Soviet Union. Given the fact that all of these countries would later have Soviet-imposed governments that would occupy them for the next, like, 60 years, I mean, or 50 years, you can't really blame them for wanting to take this opportunity to try to bring down the Soviets. And once again, I'm not saying anything about, I'm not even talking about whether you like Nazi Germany or hate Nazi Germany or whatever it is. I'm just saying, if we look at it from an Eastern European perspective, a lot of these people had very good reasons to hate the Soviet government beyond just being Jew-crazed psychopaths. I mean, are we going to say that the Finns were Jew-hating crazed psychopaths because they sided with the Axis? Because they said to the Axis, look, Russia invaded us, or the Soviets invaded us, they took a bunch of our shit, we want to get our territory back. We don't have any argument with the British or the Americans or the French, but Stalin is a clear and present threat to us, so we're going to fight with it. And so this brings us to the Waffen Grenadier Division. Now, there have been substantial war crimes charges that was levied against the Ukrainians that fought on the side of the Nazis during World War II. But I don't think any of them were ever actually proven. Let's see, Ukrainian National Army. So, okay, Ukrainian National Army. What else is interesting is this division is celebrated today in Ukraine. Like, look, it's a football club has the image of the Ukrainian SS division as fighters for Ukrainian independence. So, like, this further just kind of goes with it. Okay, so no, that's not Army Group North. I want to look at Ukrainian National Army. Uh, so now we're demonizing a dude. Um, let's see here. I mean, telling the difference between the Soviets and the Russians and Ukrainians is always kind of difficult, probably especially before Ukrainian independence. Let me see. Where's Ukrainian National Army? So yeah, so Ukrainian National Army. Okay, so let me see here. The Waffen Grenadier Division that this dude was a member of became part of the Ukrainian National Army, and it changed its name to the First Ukrainian Division, which is why the guys got confused, and the Canadian Parliament thought that it was like, with it. Let's see here. So the information is kind of interesting here. All right. Let me just go down here. Okay, so here we go. When the Ukrainian National Army was created, they were given political concessions. Firstly, the army would only be used to fight communists. It would not be used to fight the Western Allies. I don't think any of the Ukrainians really had anything against the British or the Americans or the French or any of those people. That wasn't who they were going up against. They said, look, we will fight if you let us kill the communists who just devastated our homeland. Secondly, the oath of allegiance to Hitler was conditional on them being allowed to fight the Bolsheviks. Finally, they had to be allowed to have military chaplains and function as explicitly Christian units. So a lot of people supported the Ukrainian National Army. Actually, interestingly, and it says in this article that the Banderites, if you don't know who the Banderites are, they're like the most extreme faction of Ukrainian nationalists, didn't like them. They thought that they were too moderate. They thought that they were too moderate. They weren't extreme enough. So they participated in anti-partisan activities and stuff like that. So there is claims that they committed war crimes. But as it says here, the Galician division has not specifically been found guilty of any war crimes by anyone. However, numerous accusations of impropriety have been leveled at the division, and particular members of the division from a number of sources, whatever that means. The Banderites fought against the Germans. Okay. Right. So what was I saying? Banderite is also like a term they use for the people the ultranationalists who surround Zelensky today. So here's the thing about war crimes during World War II. Was there a lot of war crimes? If we're going to accept the premise that there are war crimes, then yes, there was a lot of war crimes during World War II on all sides. Some countries were a lot worse than others, namely the Japanese were really, really bad. The Germans, it really depended upon what area you were talking about. If you were talking about Denmark, it was a very soft occupation. If we're going to talk about Poland, it was incredibly brutal. You also have the Allied side, though, where they firebombed numerous... They firebombed a large number of cities. They firebombed a lot of Japan. They carried out a blockade and a starvation campaign. The Allies did a lot of shady things during World War II. I'm not one of these people who's going to go like the 6 million people died at Dresden or Hamburg or whatever. But the Allies did some really shitty things that none of them were ever held accountable for. And the Germans did a lot of things that none of them were ever held accountable for. So literally everybody in the war went up against what's it called again? They just went up against basically everybody. Everyone committed war crimes. Everyone's been accused of committing war crimes. They did anti-guerrilla activity, that kind of thing. So let's talk a bit about the leader of the Ukrainian SS division. By the way, I've looked up this information elsewhere. I'm just using Wikipedia because it actually gives us a summary. Who is the guy that I am thinking of? The Ukrainian National Army. That was commanded by... Okay, so we look at the commander of the Ukrainian National Army, the person who was put in charge of it. Keep in mind, my mother's side are Volga Germans. I actually, because my mother's family fled the Ukraine in, I forget if it was the 20s or teens or whatever, but they fled as a result of the revolution. I actually don't have any Eastern European at all. It's just entirely. Okay, I want to read what Zach Kilgore said. Okay, according to Neolibs, Azov is okay. The Galician division is not okay, only okay, but celebrated in Ukraine. But this one guy is not. What's the rationale? I don't know. At least that they were like Christian. Okay. So we have this dude. So he was a Russian soldier. This is the commander of the Ukrainian National Army during World War II. And he served in the Russian army. When the Russian army collapsed, he served as in the military of the Ukrainian National Republic. Served in the Ukrainian National Republic. And then went into exile in Poland. He eventually joined the Polish army and fought against the Russian... Polish army. After the war, he received a medal and was sent to a German POW camp. Was later released due to his injuries after feeling ill. He was arrested by the Gestapo. So the leader of this evil Nazi army was arrested by the Gestapo and help Polish resistance members escape. So that's what we have there. So what's interesting about the head of the Ukrainian National Army is when he surrendered to the American and British forces, he begged the Poles to be able to surrender to the Western Allies. Because Galicia had been part of Poland prior to World War II, they were treated as Polish prisoners rather than Ukrainian ones, and they were not sent back. So what is kind of my takeaway from all of this? Am I saying that Hitler was based? Am I saying the Holodomor was based? Am I saying that... My point is that the entire Eastern Front in World War II was a clusterfuck. You had two groups of people who I don't like. I don't like National Socialist Germany. I don't like the Soviets. You had a lot of decent people who were just fighting for their country. Be it on the Soviet side, Russians and Ukrainians and Belarusians and other people who were fighting what they saw as the Great Patriotic War to save the fatherland from a Nazi regime that saw them as subhumans. Or if we look at the Hungarians or Romanians or Slovaks or whoever who were fighting because they were afraid of communism and the expansion of the USSR which wound up occupying them and subjecting them to decades of misery. So I just think it's more complicated than that. And I think just taking this dude because he happened to fight against the communist regime in pursuit of independence for his country, I just think that that's really silly. It's sad, and I think it's very petty. I just don't like this like my issue is this over simplification of history, that we have to these people have to be 100% good guys, 100% bad guys, and stuff like that. The big problem with World War II is it's not allowed to fade into historical memory. It's not allowed to stop being an active sore. We aren't allowed to look at it the way we look at the 30 Years' War, or the Gothic Wars, or even World War One, even stuff like the Armenian Genocide. It's not allowed to fade into historical memory and to be looked at it with a certain degree of distance. It just has to be this thing. So I don't really get how you can't just say that people who didn't like the Soviet Union had a point, and people who didn't like Nazi Germany had a point, and kind of leave it at that. I think compared to now, the Ukrainian nationalists who were fighting the Soviet government had much more reason. They had been the victims of, if not a genocide, a famine that was extirpated by the Soviet state that killed millions and millions of people. They had their culture briefly promoted, and then revoked. My point is, it was just complicated. I don't, maybe that's not the answer people want. Maybe people want me to go, do what a lot of the other pro-Russian people are doing and crying crocodile tears and going, Ukraine's a Nazi regime. Wants to legalize gay marriage and has a tranny as its spokesperson. Ukraine is it's Adolf Hitler reborn. Zelensky is Hitler. Like, to a certain extent, I wish I lived in these people's world. Like, Zelensky is like a Jewish globalist liberal who's going to legalize gay marriage in Ukraine, who's probably going to open the doors to immigration from Africa, who's like just has the dick of Joe Biden in his mouth. How is he Hitler? Like, if Ukraine is the podcast I listen to, Russians with attitude, called it soy Nazism or soy Nazis. It's like they took Nazism, they took any of the interesting parts of it out and just made it into this insufferable pause. Yeah, no, so that is my take on it. It's just also just the level of historical narrative. Like, we've gone back and forth in this last 5 minutes 20 times between the different sides. So that's that. We're going to move on to the rest of the Ukraine cinematic universe show. Zach Kilgore. So something I don't like, and I've been very consistent about this since I started my YouTube channel a decade ago. I hate fake public grief. I really hate fake public grief. I hate the current thing. I hate when people go, oh, it's like there's some group of people they never cared about. They don't know anything about them, but because it's the current thing, because it's in the news, they're going to complain and bitch about it. Like, there's so many people in the world who get no sympathy. Like, I always bring up Arab or Middle Eastern Christians. Those people have been massacred. They've been lived in ghettos. Like, most of them have left because of how shitty the lifestyle is, like what they've been forced to endure from the Islamic governments there. And no one gives shit about them. No one cares about them. No one cared when ISIS was killing them. Like, it's, no one gave a shit about them. No one gives a shit about the Armenians in Artsakh, who are going to get genocided, who are going to get driven out of their homes. No one cares about the Armenian people. No one cares about the Copts. No one cares about the Maronites. No one cares about even some peoples in Africa. No one cares about the Igbo and the Biafra War. Because those aren't popular. Those aren't chic. Those are, well, they're all Christians, and Christians can't be oppressed. We have to support the current thing. We have to support the current year. We have to pretend that it's so fucking sick. It's like the guys who are like, I do believe a lot of liberals would allow their daughters to be raped by African migrants to show how tolerant they are. And they would smile about it, and it would be like just this massive, like, it would arouse them. They would think it's like the greatest thing ever that they're showing their tolerance and stuff like that. So I hate it. And you know what's funny? And we'll get back into the Ukrainian cinematic universe in a minute. My father is one of the most wonderful, loving people I've ever met. I love my father dearly. He's spent years. Okay, Ukrainians are Christian. Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay, that was dumb of me, but it's the current thing. It's the current thing. Ukrainians are Christians. Okay, fair enough. Although their leader isn't. But where was I going with this? Anyways, my father is one of the most loving people I've ever met. He spent his whole life, I'm not going to go into details, but helping others, serving the greater good. And he hates Justin Trudeau. He hates him. Let me see if I can find this clip. I'm trying to find where it was. Basically, whenever there is a tragedy in Canada, Justin Trudeau shows up and cries. He cries. He makes a big deal of it. He makes it about him. If there's a mass shooting, if there's like a mass stabbing, he will show up there and make it about him, and my father, it just really disgusts him. It really bothers him. He's like the ultimate one. Okay. They're cannon fodder. Yeah, they banned the one church. Okay. So I think that's enough dark shit. We're gonna get into some fun shit now. We're gonna start off with a fun story. So the Ukrainian cinematic universe, we talked about the for those of you here, you guys saw the if we're doing a roundup, let's just take another look at this video. Because why not? Okay, let's see here. Where is the video I put up? Okay. Yes, go to site. So the president of the UN, sorry, not the UN, the president of Europe gave this speech at the Atlantic Council to the Prime Minister of Japan. So we got this quote, and I will say, because I'm an honest guy, some people claim that this is a misspoken, or this was only attempting to conflate nuclear weapons in general. This was not meant to be historical revisionism. I think it was, but I understand why you think that. So, we're just going to read through this. Okay. So, the Prime Minister of Japan is from Hiroshima, and she said this to him, the President of the EU. You have grown up with the stories of survivors. You wanted us. Okay. It was a sobering start to the G7 and one that I will not forget, especially at a time when Russia threatens to use nuclear weapons again. And in the shadow of Hiroshima, it is unforgivable. No one is better poised than Japan to warn us of the extreme danger of this recklessness right from the beginning of the war. So, many of your relatives lost their lives. Oh, yeah, there's a spelling error there. When the atomic bomb razed Hiroshima to the ground, when Russia threatens to use nuclear weapons again. So, a lot of people, myself included, think that she was attempting to imply that Russia nuked Japan, or at the very least, portray Russia as being a psychotic nuclear power that, like just a psychotic nuclear power. So, I think the other one is that it's just trying to say that this is going to happen again because Russia's going to do it. So let's just go in and take a peek at this.
Start to the G7 and one that I will not forget.
Okay, so let's listen to her talk. So you guys can make up your own minds. Let's go.
Us to listen to the same stories, to face the past and learn something about the future. It was a sobering start to the G7 and one that I will not forget, especially at a time when Russia threatens to use nuclear weapons once again. It is heinous, it is dangerous, and in the shadow of Hiroshima, it is unforgivable.
So people in the chat, you can tell me what you think. I can see it go either way. But we're going to pretend for the sake of this that this is an alternate history game. The UCU is branching out into video games, and they are going to release their version of Kaiserreich. It's a what if the Soviet Union won World War II. That is... Hey, girl. Come on. Come up here. Come up here, you mangy cat. There's a good kitty. Okay, Rain tried to bite me. She didn't want to be picked up. Look, girl, I know Justin Trudeau is cringe, okay? Yeah, so they're going to release a what if the Soviet Union won World War II. So they nuked Japan, they invaded Japan, Japan became a communist state that was occupied by the Soviet Union for the next 50 years. I don't know what else the Soviet Union took over. They're going to reveal it. But this is the teaser trailer for the alternate history video game. And on that topic, I have another alternate history game we're going to look at. This is this is a second teaser trailer from the same alternate history. So once again, oh no, that's the wrong one. Is that the wrong one? I think that's the wrong one. Which is of course behind a paywall because everything's behind a paywall. Let me see here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to have to post a screenshot of this. I'm sorry, people, but as the Washington Post says, democracy dies in darkness. And so we're just going to have to do this. So this is the relevant clip from the article. Just if anybody can, it's okay. Secondly, relentless pressure must be maintained on the Russian occupation throughout winter. This means sustaining the successful bite and hold operations. Pitting Russian forces to the front will steadily erode strength and will and reserves. If the Red Army's morale is already poor, make it poorer. It's still called the Red Army, guys. It's not the... What is its official name? I'd imagine it's Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. It's just called Russian Armed... It's called Russian Armed Forces or the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. But no, it's the Red Army, guys. So this is written by Richard Behrens, who I believe is like a former general or something. Yeah, British officer. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, here we go. So he was a general in the British Army. Awesome. Awesome. He wrote an article and he talked about how there's the fucking Red Army. So that's that's part of the alternate history video game. Like I said, the Soviet Army won World War II. The Soviet Army won World War II. They nuked Japan. The Soviet Union still exists. We have the Red Army. So that's cool. Okay, so we did the Zelensky secret plan. Now, there is a horror movie that has been announced as part of the Ukraine cinematic universe. So we're going to be taking a look at this. Hashtag Reuters. Ukrainian intercepts show Russian soldiers angry at losses disarray. So you know how there's all these like movies like Where a Stranger Calls, The Ring, all these things where there's like the cursed phone call that you hear and you die. They have decided to make their own version of this as part of the whole Russian thing. So the Ukrainians have gone through and they've been monitoring every Russian phone call they could find over the last couple months. And they have succeeded in recording 17 phone calls of Russian soldiers complaining. So it's going to be called 17 Phone Calls, and it's going to be like a film looking at the war from the lives of these 17 Russian soldiers as they get eaten alive by the Azov battalion. And they come to regret their role in destroying Ukraine's sovereignty. Now, some people might go, wait a minute, there's like, what, almost 1 million Russian soldiers in Ukraine, they could only find 17? Apparently yes. Not sus at all. Also, even if these are real, like, soldiers complain all the time. People complain all the time about everything. Like, you complain at work. You think soldiers don't complain? They don't go, oh, this shit, the food's shit. I want to go home. I'm tired of this war. I'm tired of getting shot at. Like, soldiers just complain. It doesn't... Okay, so let's just read through this. Let's see if this sounds real. A Russian soldier called his wife and said his unit was taking heavy casualties. They were so badly equipped, he said, it felt like the Soviet forces in World War II. They are fucking us up, Andre said by telephone on July 12th, comparing the onslaught to the worst moments of Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union. No fucking ammunition, nothing. Shall we use our fingers as bayonets? Because soldiers never complain about not having... Military commanders never complain about not having enough ammunition. The conversation was one excerpt from 17 phone calls placed by Russian soldiers in the first 2 weeks of July, intercepted by the SBU. The speculative... Okay, let's see here. Comes into the conditions of some Russian soldiers as Kiev prosecuted a major counteroffensive was started in early June. So let's see here. Reuters was unable to determine how representative these intercepts are of the condition in Russia's armed forces. The Ukrainian intelligence sources said they illustrate the challenges facing Russian soldiers, but did not elaborate on how the recordings were selected. Okay. You don't want to give us like some sort of total. That's it. It's over. We got 17 calls. It's a horror movie. Okay. All right. So we also have a zombie movie. Now, I talked a bit about the zombie movie previously. I know this is antiwar.com. Don't worry. This is just because it's not behind a paywall. The Economist's actual interview is behind a paywall. So that's what we have. I said there was going to be a zombie movie when we talked about the nuclear power plant. So Zelensky implies Ukrainian refugees in Europe will resort to terrorism if West curtails aid. So we're going to have a massive gamer uprising. Oh, okay, let me see that got cut off. Gamers are going to rise up all over Europe, and the gamers are going to take down the various European countries. So this is a direct quote. This is from the curtailing aid to Ukraine will only prolong the war, Mr. Zelensky argues, and it would create risks for the West in its own backyard. There is no way of predicting how the millions of Ukrainian refugees in European countries would react to their country being abandoned. Ukrainians have generally behaved well and are very grateful to those who sheltered them. They will not forget that generosity, but it would not be a good story for Europe if we were to drive these people into a corner. That's a spicy comment. So let's see if I can. Okay, here we go. Yes, direct quote from the Economist interview. This is on the Economist. Oh, okay. Oh, they did an archive. Oh, thank God. Okay, so we can actually read this. So yeah, he said that. I mean, is that not a threat? Is that not a threat for to carry out mass domestic terrorism if you don't keep giving us money? Am I insane? So it's going to be a zombie movie. There's going to be a virus that Zelensky, that's his secret plan. The secret plan is it's a zombie movie, and it's refugees across the West are going to rise up and overthrow the governments there and infect the local population. I think this is a good course of action, Mr. Zelensky. I think this will win you a lot of support if you keep talking like this and keep acting like this. It's insane. I don't know. That's the zombie movie. So we got that as part of the Ukrainian cinematic universe. Okay, we covered that. We got another fun video. Another movie that we've announced is they are remaking The Prestige. Great movie that Christopher Nolan made, but Zelensky is starring in a remake of it. So Zelensky went to speak at the UN, and no one sat and listened to his speech. So what they did was the Ukrainian state media. Now, I've heard some people argue that this is disinformation or this isn't real, but as far as I know, it's real, and I'm sorry if I got beaten by Russia shills. So he gave a speech to the UN, and the Ukrainian government edited in footage of the UN being full. However, Zelensky was in the audience of the speech where everyone was there for. So we have this bizarre scenario of Zelensky on the speech giving a speech while it cuts to him in the audience. So it's like The Prestige, like where God, who is the main character of The Prestige again? What's his name? Was that Heath Ledger? It was Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman. Okay. Where Hugh Jackman is up on the stage, the machine comes up, it creates a copy of him, and it's the transported man. It's a duplication machine. So we have that. Okay, here we go. Ukrainian President Zelensky has become a viral sensation, not for his speech at the recent Ukraine General Assembly session, but for an apparent editing error. Ukrainian media released footage of Zelensky's UN speech that had been edited to make it look like he was speaking to a larger audience.
Не розгортати цю зброю, не розповсюджувати, не допускати погрози нею, не допускати тренування для того, щоб забезпечити ядерне роззброєння. І це хороша стратегія. Але
It's Jover. It's over. What the? Oh, they aren't paying these guys enough money. Oh, come on, man. Yeah. Oh, okay, he's also. Yeah. That was the actual. No one cared. No one showed up to his speech. So that was there was that. There was the Prestige remake. We also have the Cool Guys Don't Walk Away from Explosions. So I don't think I actually have that article prepared, but I think I forget if it's Foreign Policy or The Economist, but they've said, okay, Ukraine can't win a conventional war, so what we just need to do is just go completely ape shit and just destroy Russian civilian infrastructure. So Ukraine was given a bunch of weapons called Storm Shadows, which are cruise missiles by the British government. So we don't know how many there are, but the total United Kingdom stockpile is about 700, we'll say. So I don't know how many of these they sent to Ukraine. We'll say they sent most of them. We'll say they sent 500 to Ukraine. I think that's fair. So Zelensky wanted his, like, cool guys don't look at explosions meme, because everything has to be an action movie. So there is the headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Fleet is in Crimea. It got hit by a Ukrainian Storm Shadow missile. So I heard different things. The Ukrainians claim that they fired, I think it was 3 or 4 missiles at it that hit the building. They claim that it killed, I think it was 34 people, including the commander-in-chief of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Now, the Russians claim that the Ukrainians fired, I think it was like 5 missiles or something like that. 4 of them got shot down. One of them hit the building, which was empty, and killed like a janitor or something. So maybe like 1 guy died. So, yeah, so Moscow's top admiral in Crimea, and then he showed up in a video a couple days after the attack. He was at this conference with what's his name? Shoyu. So, yeah. But regardless of whether or not it hit, Ukraine only got like, what, 500 of these? So they spent like 1% of like all their missiles on firing at this building, like to just screw with Russia. Like, let's be honest, is the Russian Navy high command meeting in an unarmored public building, like, or are they meeting in a bunker somewhere, or do they move around constantly or something like that? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that it's the latter, but we needed to have this like cool, we're blowing up the headquarters. It looks very dramatic. It's very dramatic. Okay, so moving on to our next topic. I don't know if anyone remembers the breakup. So the breakup was a romantic comedy starring Vince Vaughn and Jennifer Aniston, in which the couple breaks up and does not get back together at the end of the movie. It was supposed to be an inversion of what normally happens, wherein the couple gets back together at the end of the movie, and it's true love, and it's all that kind of stuff. So they've decided they're going to make a sequel to it, and the sequel is going to be called The Drowning Man. And it's not a breakup of Vince Vaughn and Jennifer Aniston. It is a breakup of Zelensky and Duda. Let's see here. Zelensky and Polish President Duda are best of friends. Here we go. Polish President hugging Zelensky before his first address to oh, look at that. They're just giving a big hug. I don't think Duda's that tall. Zelensky is like really short. Let's see here. Just looking so friendly. Just look at them. Look at the two of them together. I'd play some music now if it wouldn't get my channel struck down, so. Unfortunately, though, there's been some problems in paradise. So there's the whole grain deal. So Duda's party is United Justice, Law and Justice. Now, Law and Justice is a right-wing Catholic conservative nationalist party. And what kind of people do you think tend to vote for Catholic conservative parties? They tend to be farmers. And farmers don't like it that Poland was importing all this cheap grain from Ukraine. So it's been this big issue with the Eastern European countries that their countries keep getting flooded with cheap grain from the Ukraine, and it keeps putting down food prices. So this happened a couple months back, but let's just read this. The ministers of agriculture of Bulgaria, Poland, Romania, Hungary, and Czechia and Slovakia held an online meeting today. They agreed that specific measures are needed on the part of the European Commission and that funding alone does not solve the problems of farmers. Okay. So farmers' warehouses are still full of last year's produce. It is also becoming clear at the meeting that Slovakia has halted processing 1,500 tons of wheat with proven levels of pesticides banned by the EU. Earlier this month, Hungary destroyed more than 29 tons of corn with toxins and GMOs. So, yeah. So it turns out that the grain that Ukraine was shipping to the rest of Europe was contaminated. It was full of pesticides, chemicals, GMOs. It was no good. So they were flooding Eastern Europe with this cheap grain. I remember seeing a report somewhere, it's not even fit to feed the animals. So Poland and the other people decided to block the grain imports. However, Ukraine, in typical you-know-who fashion, decided to sue them. the countries that have been giving them all the money and weapons. I think there's millions of Ukrainian refugees in Poland. So Ukraine has filed lawsuits to the World Trade Organization against Slovakia, Poland, and Hungary over their bans on food imports. It said such restrictions were a violation of international obligations by Ukraine's EU neighbors. They say the needs. Okay, so let's see here. So the grain. So actually, what brought down the grain deal? Maybe we can talk a bit about the grain deal. I'm sorry if I'm kind of losing the joke here for a second, but so the grain deal was that Ukraine would be allowed to export grain down a certain open corridor, provided the corridor was not used for military purposes, and that there's a couple conditions. Russia's agricultural bank would be unfrozen, along with its assets. Its agricultural bank would be reconnected to SWIFT, and Russia would be allowed to export, I think it was fertilizer and food. None of this happened, even though it was in the signed agreement. And in like the last week of the grain deal, Ukraine used the corridor to carry out drone attacks on the Crimean Bridge through the corridor that was reserved for the safe passage of the grain. That pissed Russia off. Russia said we aren't going to renew the grain deal and blew most of the port infrastructure in Odessa up. So the EU is forced Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, Bulgaria, and Romania to take the grain in when they didn't want it. So Poland said it would keep the ban regardless. We maintain our position. We think it's correct. It results from an economic analysis. A complaint before the WTO doesn't impress us. So, yeah, that's it's bad, guys. But I mean, it couldn't get worse, could it? It couldn't. Like, that's pretty bad. But the breakup couldn't go further. Duda refuses to meet with Zelensky and says Ukraine is behaving like a drowning man, pulling him down. That is just blown the fuck out right there. Whoa. Here is let us listen to what Duda is saying. Anyone who has ever participated in the rescue of a drowning person knows that they are extremely dangerous because they can pull you into the depths. He has incredible strength due to personal fear, adrenaline rush, and can simply drown the rescuer. They say that a drowning man is grasping at straws, but in fact he is grasping at everything he can. It's a bit like the situation between Poland and the Ukraine. It's over. It's over. Duda also called on Ukraine to remember the assistance it received from Ukraine. Ukraine is under Russian attack, undoubtedly in a very difficult position, and it's grasping at everything it can. Is it possible to be offended by it? Of course we can complain. Let's see. Of course we must protect ourselves, because if the drowning person harms us and drowns us, then we will not help, so we will have to take care of our interests and do it decisively. So Duda said he was not able to hold a scheduled meeting with Zelensky in New York. There's delays in his speeches at the General Assembly. According to him, the issue of a meeting with Zelensky is currently off agenda. They aren't going to talk anymore. It's over, Zelensky. It's over. So Zelensky said this about Poland during his speech. It's disturbing to see how some in Europe, some of our friends in Europe, are playing out solidarity in political theater, making a thriller out of the grain. Thriller? Michael Jackson reference. It may seem they are playing their own role, but in fact they are helping to prepare the stage for the Moscow actor, he said. Ukraine is preparing an embargo on imports from Poland. Okay, so they're banning onions, cabbage, tomatoes, and apples from Poland. So it's over. And now we have the Prime Minister of Poland said to Zelensky, never insult Poland again. Suggested his neighbor was putting on a show over the disputes on grain exports. We have made a thriller from the grain. I want to tell President Zelensky never to insult the Poles again. The Polish people will never allow this to happen, and defending the good name of Poland is not only my duty and honor, but also the most important task of the Polish government. Okay, so... Poland announced that... So after Zelensky called them like a Moscow stooge, the Polish Prime Minister said in a blunt social media statement, his country will no longer give weapons to Ukraine because now we're arming Poland. It's over. This has seemed to indicate a major change in policy. Until now, Poland has been one of the most forthright countries in the race to get weapons and resources into Ukraine. So they tried to walk it back later on. He said, referring to new weapons being purchased for the Polish army, that older weapon systems Warsaw deems not necessary of modernizing could still be shipped across the border. But it's basically, you're cut off, Ukraine. You're done. We'll give you some of our old stuff. We're not giving you any more new stuff. So we got that going down. Property. Let me see if I can find this one. This is a fun little story. Okay, so the EU announced that they are just going to confiscate anything that they find. So if you're a Russian who enters the EU, they're just going to confiscate anything that they can take from you. So ban residents of the terrorist country Russia from importing cars, smart tools, foreign jewelries, laptops, and other things. Russians are not even allowed to bring shampoo in. So if you're a Russian who goes into the EU, they're just going to take all of your personal property. Not even your private property, just your personal property. They're going to take your wallet. They're going to take your shampoo. They're going to take your underwear. They're going to take your car. Toothpaste. They're going to take your toilet paper. That's cool. That was a good decision. That's going to end well. Okay, so Slovakia also said they're not going to be giving any more stuff to Ukraine. And I don't know. I'm debating whether I want to do the snakening yet. We'll try. I might have to do a separate one just because the snakening is like... Snakening is going to take a while. So the Great Snakening has started, in which the United States has started to try to slowly throw Zelensky under the bus. We have two approaches to this. They got the guys back who made the Long War mod for XCOM 2, and the guys who made Terra Invicta, and they're going to have a long war. It's going to be a long war now. That is the new story that we're being fed. That, okay, the offensive was a complete and total failure. The spring offensive offended everybody. It sucked, but it's going to be a long war. It's going to be a war of attrition, and Ukraine's going to somehow win a war of attrition. Now, I don't think it's here, but the new narrative that I'm seeing as part of the long war narrative is, let's see here, that I think that that Ukraine needs to build up its own military-industrial complex. That what we're going to do is we're going to build up Ukraine's military industry. It's going to get bigger than Russia's. And we're going to have Ukrainianization. It's not at all like Vietnamization. We're going to have Ukrainianization. And the Ukrainians are going to be able to produce all our own stuff. It won't cost us anything. It's just going to be, it's going to be over. Yeah, so we're going to do that. Europe needs a more robust industrial base. It's going to be a long war. Let me see if I can find this one where economists winning the long war in Ukraine. Drones open a new front in Russia. Okay, well, I can't read this because it's behind a paywall, but basically, let me see if I can find it. Let's see, where's Cache? Okay, I can't find it. Oh, it's not important. Ukraine is ready for the long war with Russia. So let's see what Zelensky had to say. Stated that Ukraine, following the example of Israel, may focus on a long-lasting war with Russia without losing the lives of Ukrainians, and explain the risks of taking the war into the territory of Russia. Israel is fighting. It depends on the kind of war. We are ready to fight for a long time without losing people. It is possible. We can minimize casualties following the example of Israel. Zelensky also said, I think it's a big risk. We will definitely lose all support from international parties if we invade Russia. Let's see here. Okay, so we're going to basically just do what... this is from Ukrainian Pravda. That's fucking amazing. That Yahoo News is quoting, is running an article from fucking Pravda. That is incredible. Obama's policy changes aside Russia is prepared for a long bloody war. Let's see here. Okay, so I don't see that, but there is the that is the article. That is the thing that okay. Oh, here we go. Okay, I had it under the snakening. It was not under the it was not under the long war article. It was under the snakening. Okay. So let's see here. British defense giant BAE sets up base in Ukraine, prompting warning from Kremlin. So British military equipment maker BAE Systems is establishing a local legal entry in Ukraine to ramp up its support to the country's armed forces, prompting an immediate warning from the Kremlin. So this is the new narrative. We're gonna stop giving Ukraine weapons. We're going to build industry in Ukraine, and Ukraine's going to make its own weapons somehow. I mean, if the U.S. can't scale up their production in a reasonable amount of time, why would Ukraine be able to build it from scratch? Alongside our government customers, okay, of course, a facility is for the yeah. So Kremlin spokesman just said that they're going to blow it up. By spending weapons. Jump in net profits. Okay, so we have that being built. We have this, the belated transformation of Ukraine's defense industry. The sector faces the war's depleted weapons. Okay. Long overdue transformation. Also, the defense minister. Well, we'll get to the defense minister in a minute. There's a lot of stuff to cover here. So, yeah, so they are, 1 second. Paywalls are so shitty. It's so annoying to have to deal with this garbage. But democracy dies in darkness. as we're told. Let me see if I can view it on ground news. Um, 100% of the sources lean left. That's funny. Okay, let me see if I can look at it in my my other monitor. No, it's blocked. But basically, they're saying like that they're ramping up their industry, and Ukraine's going to be able to start taking over, doing a bunch of this stuff. Ukraine is rebuilding its military-industrial complex. That's cool. Here, Ukrainian Parliament appointed a new defense minister. Yeah, because the previous defense minister, it turned out, was super corrupt. And they'd let him been like just stealing money for a long time. They, U.S. announced another boost. Number could reach 57,000 rounds a month. Reforming state enterprise and incentivizing private arms manufacturers. Let's see here. Under Urmanov, these private manufacturers could account for as much as 80% of local output. So Ukraine they're building this stuff up. There's no chance that Russia is going to destroy any of this. He has burgeoning weapons industries, enabling it to project power far beyond its front lines, from CNN. So, like, guys, they don't need weapons anymore. They can build their own weapons. They're developing weapons with America now. Joint weapons development. So we have this narrative coming out. We also have this, though. So that is one half of the snake inning. This is the other half of the snake inning. Baltic Newsnet. Russia increases production of military equipment more than 10 times. I thought Russia was out of military equipment. That's what we've been told. I just saw this. Proud of son for beating prisoner. Okay, increase in production range of military equipment. This is the 10th one in a row. Production of various has increased by 2 to 10s of times. So, yeah, it's saying that they're going up. African Business Insider is reporting that Russia is making up to 7 times as much ammunition as Western arms makers. And note when these articles were published. These articles were published the same week. We have the New York Times is saying that manufacturing is outpacing pre-war levels. Russia overcomes sanctions to expand missile production. Whoa, I thought Russia was out of all of this stuff. It's almost as if like they're preparing us for the snake inning on Zelensky. That's cool. What else do we have? We have the resignation. We have Reuters, who's running negative ads on this dude. So this is the Ukraine Defense Minister Odysee Reznikov submitted his resignation. Let's see here. Secured billions of dollars worth of military aid. Did an amazing job. Let's see here. Was not implicated personally by corruption allegations. Yeah, I'm sure he wasn't. But the accusations promoted calls for him to be fired. He was a victim of a smear campaign. Has zero tolerance for corruption as Kiev tries to advance its bid to join the European Union and show it is about enforcing the rule of law like it enforced it on Gonzalo Lira. So they got rid of him. The U.S. was giving all this money to this like corrupt defense minister for months. Russia may be about to get a new friendly leader in Europe. Robert Fico might win the next Slovakian election, so they're going to snake on Ukraine. Biden has started calling for, are saying I can't do this because of but they're calling Zelensky crazy. They're saying he has an obsession with Bakhmut. He's nuts. Have this. Where is this? I forget. But Biden has called for a diplomatic solution to the problem. So it's no longer however it takes. It's we need a diplomatic solution to this. Also, Zelensky tried to go to a joint session of Congress, and he just got blown out. They told him no. Let me see here. Let me see if I can find... JD Vance has gone like... I love JD Vance. JD Vance is such a king. Okay, so let me see if I can... Okay. Let's try to find it. U.S. will pay salaries to thousands of Ukrainians during government shutdown. That's cool. Bizarre to claim the admin. Okay. This reminds me of 04. Where is it? Just trying to find it. Because he was posting a lot about... we are providing the military as long as it takes. Look, I know this Schumer changed the dress code, but letting someone in the Senate change her dress like this really crosses the line. It's over. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. Ukraine is holding an American journalist hostage. This is the disgrace. Why is the Biden admin opening up the checkbook without any accountability? So we have J.D. Vance, who is a U.S. senator, probably the best U.S. senator, arguably, him and Josh Hawley. And he is talking about Gonzalo Lira. He's bringing it up. Senator slams taxpayer-funded Ukrainian spokesperson for issuing death threats. Are we really funding a military that is threatening the free speech rights of people who disagree with them? I think he called her a weirdo too. The media arm. So this was a case where the Ukrainians claimed that the Russians fired a missile at a Ukrainian city that killed 15 people. It turned out that it was a Ukrainian missile. I don't think they did it deliberately, but okay, this is real.
Social media platform for carrying this exclusive message from Kyiv. There has been much discussion recently related to my role within the armed forces of Ukraine. Before answering some of the questions put forward by Senator Vance of Ohio, I'd like to thank all those in the U.S. who are supporting the Ukrainian people. Without Republicans and Democrats working together on behalf of Ukraine, our growing and unstoppable success on the battlefield and the inevitable victory it will bring over the Russian invaders would take significantly longer. The delivery of ATACMS will further expedite our victory while saving lives and tax dollars in the process. America is once more showing why it's history's greatest republic and the world's lone superpower, and all of us in Ukraine are humbled by the support we're receiving from the American people. Let me also take a moment in my role as spokesperson for the AFU's Territorial Defense Forces to state unequivocally that we in the TDF and across Ukraine believe journalists are heroes and have the right to report on Ukraine's war for liberation without interference. Free speech is the pillar of all democracy, the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.
Okay, so that is the weirdo that the Ukrainian government has recruited to do its shit. So J.D. Vance demands Biden and Min reveal info on America's trans spokesperson. If Ukrainians want to hire weirdos to threaten Americans, I guess it's their right. They shouldn't be using our taxpayers. I like to explain who this crazy person. Like, come on, guys. Like, I do the Ukrainian cinematic universe jokes, but look at this thing. This is like, whatever. It's just fucked. So he started bringing up Gonzalo Lira, and that kind of thing. Okay, so what do we have left on the snakening? Okay, so we'll go to the, so what is this all leading up to? What is the exit plan? Washington Post, democracy dies in darkness, democracy dies behind a paywall. See if I can find a, they should change that to their logo. Democracy dies behind a paywall. Okay, here we go. Despite Russia's war in Ukraine and a nationwide state of martial law, some Western politicians are pushing the government in Kiev to hold parliamentary and presidential elections, a prospect that has left many Ukrainian officials scratching their heads. The proposal, floated by the Dutch head of the Council of Europe's Parliamentary Assembly, was also pressed by Lindsey Graham, Elizabeth Warren, Richard Blumenthal, otherwise focused on solidifying U.S. assistance and support to Ukraine. Other Republicans have taken up the cause, including a couple people. So Zelensky had canceled elections because elections can't happen under martial law. Holding free and fair elections in wartime is virtually impossible and also ill-advised, according to Ukraine officials. Wait, what? What? But the voter fraud doesn't exist. Roughly 1/5 of Ukraine territory is occupied. Millions of Ukrainians are unable to vote. Are they implying that, like in elections, people get disenfranchised and they're not able to vote? That's against the TOS. The pressure to hold elections highlights the constant demands by some in the West that Ukraine prove its commitment to democracy. Ukrainians say that in order to hold a major vote during wartime, considerable financial, logistical, and legal hurdles must be overcome. In private, some say the prospect is outright impossible. It could provide Moscow's security forces with the means to infiltrate and weaken Ukraine from within. It's over, boys. We can't have elections. The Russians are pushing for this through their secret channels. So there's like some conspiracy that's attempting to mess with election results, manipulate and create divisions in Ukrainian society. It's senseless to hold elections. It would undermine the very fragile political resilience of the Ukraine state. Also dismiss the idea of holding elections out of hand and risk alienating key political players. So the schizo posting theory is that this is their way of getting rid of Zelensky, that they are going to snake on him by rigging the election so he loses the election, or otherwise gets overthrown, because it's a way for, like, so if Zelensky loses the election, then they can throw him under the bus with, they can give him his like $100 million. He can go to his home in Florida or whatever and spend the rest of his days on a country club as an exiled leader. So that's a way of getting rid of him, and it doesn't look like the U.S. turned their back on him. Whoever comes to power next will negotiate. Zelensky has passed a law stating that they cannot negotiate with Russia. The current logic is the U.S. government wants to freeze the conflict. They started talking about divided Germany. They started talking about North and South Korea. It is, yeah. So that is the snake inning. We are in the early phases of the snake inning. The counteroffensive that offended me, that offended you, and offended everybody was a disaster. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians died for basically no reason, to appease, like, I don't know, Biden's ego or something like that. Tens of thousands of Ukrainian men just running into minefields, heavily defended positions where they're outnumbered and outgunned, all because this whole thing is a media circus. And it comes down to, when we talk about the Ukraine cinematic universe, yes, I do it because it's funny, but it's also just sad, because these people are literally running the biggest, I guess, it might be the biggest post-World War II war now. I don't know if it's bigger than Korea or Vietnam, but one of the biggest post-World War II wars, based on, like, movie logic, with, like, releasing trailers for the offensive and announcing you have, like, secret plans and touting out whatever the fuck this thing is. And, like, General Mill, like, it's madness. And hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men are going to die because of these retards. So the current plan is they're going to freeze the conflict somehow. Basically, the U.S. government negotiated with itself, and the moderate neocons came to the decision that the best way they can deal with this is to freeze the conflict, make it so they don't lose before the presidential election, and then maybe rebuild Ukraine, or if Joe gets re-elected, just abandon Ukraine to the death, to its inevitable fate. I think that's more or less what the plan is. What do you think, Rain? Are you going to vote in the Ukrainian election? I'm going to admit, guys, I know it's bad. I did vote today. I voted conservative, which I know the conservatives suck, but they're tough on crime, and I live in Manitoba, so what do you expect? Anyways, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this. I might edit this into separate parts and put it up, but I hope you enjoyed it. It was but I had a lot of shit that I needed to cover.